Good evening and welcome to Thursdays with NAMI. My name is Peg Morrison. I'll be your host tonight. I am the Assistant Director of NAMI North Carolina. That's the National Alliance on Mental Illness North Carolina, and I'm glad y'all are here. Thursdays with NAMI is our way of building conversations and building community around the topic of mental health. Tonight's topic is anosognosia, or lack of insights. The word is derived from Greek and literally means lack of knowledge of disease. It's a terrible thing to be overwhelmed by a condition that keeps us from seeing things clearly, keeps us from knowing our own mind. For friends and loved ones, it's such a helpless feeling to watch someone who's clearly suffering, maybe hearing voices or feeling paranoid, yet they assure us that they are fine, they don't need help. And what do you do? It's something that a lot of us struggle with in NAMI circles. Our guest tonight has shown a lot of courage and resilience in the face of living with schizophrenia. Sarah Ryan has experienced psychosis. After getting help, she wrote about her journey of recovery. She's been in the national NAMI blog, the local one here in Wake County, that's Raleigh and Cary, North Carolina. So she's got local and national exposure as a writer. She'll be shedding some light on this topic, anosognosia, which can be so confusing and difficult. As usual, the first part of our show will be an interview with our guest. Halfway through, we'll show a video of the week, and then we'll take time taking questions from you, members of our virtual studio audience, live and on Facebook. Now, a word from our sponsors. Thursdays with NAMI is funded in part by the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services, Division of Mental Health, Developmental Disabilities, and Substance Use Services through the Federal Community Mental Health Block Grant Fund. We're grateful for their guidance and their support. Now, without any further ado, welcome, Sarah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm thrilled that you're here. Sarah and I met at a little shindig a couple weeks ago and got to talking, and I thought, you'd be a great person to talk to on my show. So on NAMI North Carolina's show, we always love to hear about the background of our guests. Maybe you could tell us about yourself in a nutshell.
Well, in a nutshell, I'm a native of Cary, North Carolina. I grew up with a pretty normal childhood. I love to draw. I was always close to my art teachers.
Yeah.
I was a Girl Scout, an Indian Princess. I was a high school athlete. I was a church member, an active church member. And it was really in college where I started to experience difficulty, where things changed for me. But I have an undergraduate degree from UNC Chapel Hill, a master's degree from NC State, and I'm currently married, and I had a son 3 years ago, and I have my own small business in graphic design.
Nice. Wow. Well, there's a lot to unpack there. You've done a lot, accomplished a lot of things. And it's interesting to me how often we see that what I think of as NAMI people whose lives have been impacted by mental illness, is that you have like a certain arc where your story is quote unquote normal, and then something with the brain chemistry changes and it becomes so much more difficult. Let's start with the basics. Tell us what schizophrenia is and what has it looked like in your life?
Well, there's a lot of controversial takes on schizophrenia, but the basic definition is that I'm using my notes, a disorder that affects a person's ability to think, feel, and behave clearly. The causes of schizophrenia have not been proven or determined, but it can be a combination of genetic tendencies, environmental characteristics, but it can be a change, and they've actually identified differences in how a schizophrenic brain is, like difference in shape and process and everything. At least online it says that schizophrenia can't be cured, but for me, I feel like I'm in permanent remission. But for me, schizophrenia, I had an amphetamine intoxication in college where I was overprescribed Adderall by a psychiatrist, and it led to my first semi-psychotic break. It wasn't a full-blown psychotic break, But I was never the same after that.
Mm,
I was cognitively damaged from that event, and I just was never really myself for a long time. I managed to re-enroll in school and finish my undergraduate degree, and then when I was healed enough, I got a master's degree. But then the stress of my master's degree and the pressure I put on myself and not taking care of myself led to my first real psychotic break. And
mm,
I had 3 psychotic breaks in 2 years, and the psychotic breaks were of a schizophrenic nature. Um, so my symptoms of schizophrenia were really just contained within these acute psychotic breaks that lasted a few weeks. But during those, I had audible and visual hallucinations, um, paranoia, um, believing that I was having thoughts that weren't my own,
okay.
conspiracies.
Ooh,
And they were all very terrifying, so terrifying that I've gone on to be diagnosed with complex PTSD, which I've been working on in therapy.
mm,
Um, but because of, even though I haven't had symptoms of mental illness for a decade, because I had these psychotic breaks and they were of a schizophrenic nature with the conspiratorial aspect and that cognitive, yeah. So because of the nature of the schizophrenic psychotic breaks, I'm taking antipsychotics for life. It's
mm,
just not worth risking everything I've built for myself to just to prove something to myself or other people that I don't take antipsychotics.
mhm.
And yeah, and
Yeah.
it was a tough recovery. At first, we didn't know if I'd ever work again. I was given disability papers by the hospital social worker, and I just wouldn't sign them because I refused to think that my career or my professional life were over. And I went on to have multiple jobs that went well, and now I'm self-employed. Um, but it was really a battle. It was an emotional and spiritual battle to bounce back after those because they were absolutely devastating.
Mhm. Well, I want to really honor your decision to, you know, be very intentional and no, I'm not going to sign disability papers because my goal is over here. I also want to honor people who choose to sign the disability papers and take that path. I think they're both wonderful and whatever supports your recovery, but it's good to have that insight of I want my goal here and so my behavior is going to point in this direction.
Yeah, and disability isn't always easy to get. So for the people that do get disability, it can be a godsend. It can be a miracle
Mhm.
to have that support.
Right. Right. So I know I have some experience with paranoia and my pre-treatment days. I think it's called interpersonal paranoia. I was very concerned that people were gossiping about me, like just very focused on that and calling people. Was that the kind of thing you were wrapped up in, or do you mind sharing a little bit of your thought process when you were struggling?
It was it. I believed that there was a conspiracy to kill me, and I think that's paranoia to an extreme. I thought that hospital staff were trying to poison me, or that there were people stationed outside the hospital ready to get me. Um,
Mm,
it was paranoia to an extreme, and it was incredibly painful because in this conspiracy element I had in my head, even people very close to me were involved. And that sounds ridiculous. And how could you be scared of something like that? Because it's so ridiculous. But if it was really true, you would be really scared, and it would be really sad and painful. And one of the things I say is, once you are free of the psychotic break, you realize that what happened wasn't real, but it's still your real emotions that went through that. Emotionally, everything you went through is still very real.
absolutely. Yeah. I understand that completely and uh, yeah, your brain is processing it as though everything is perfectly squared with reality. Um, and I've shared this on the show before too. At my lowest point, I was terrified that aliens were going to come and abduct me in the night. And I knew Like my rational mind was saying, no, that's not going to happen. Do not tell anyone you think that. But I was terrified.
And
Yeah,
it
it's very
sounds like
terrifying.
it still sounds like you had insight to filter and be like, no, maybe this isn't real, you know?
That's true. That's true. In real time, I did. Part of me could see it and part of me could not. But yeah, the terror was very real. That's a good point, though. You've told us a little bit about your dark days. Anything else about the difficult times? What were they like?
I think the hardest times, while the psychotic breaks themselves were a very, very terrifying time, I think the most emotionally painful times were right after the psychotic breaks, coming home to stay with my family, had no money, had no job, had no home. And
Yeah.
and it was I would just go through every morning when I woke up, I would go through all these negative thoughts about how my life was ruined and how I was so devastated and ashamed of what had happened, and that it was no use, that there was no way I could ever bounce back and recover with my life, and my life be a life I can look back and be proud on. But I defeated the odds. And there was so long where I didn't care whether I lived or died after everything that happened. And I'm so glad that I chose to stick it out, because good things did come my way.
Wow, that is wonderful. And I'm glad you stayed the course too and are here with us tonight. It is a beautiful thing. And I guess this strikes me as a good time to mention NAMI support groups, how helpful they can be when you're in that early recovery phase and all you feel is the devastation and the loss. And it helps a lot to meet other people who have been there and have come out of the darkness and are moving in a different direction.
Yes, I've become a facilitator for the Connection Support Group, and I've met a lot of amazing people through that.
I have too. Same. I love the connection program. Yeah. So what helped with your recovery and what hurt?
Well, for me, it was random acts of love and kindness, and people who never stopped believing in me and seeing who I really was.
Mm.
A couple examples of random acts of love. Uh, my mother's friend, when I came back from the hospital um, home to my mother's house, she gave me flowers. And,
Oh,
most of the time people do get flowers when you go to the hospital, but maybe not when you go to the mental hospital. But, you know, in that moment, I felt like I was being recognized as a medical patient who deserved compassion. And, that really meant a lot to me, that, you know, it made me feel normal, like, oh, I just went to the hospital like anybody else. Um, I think another one,
wow.
yeah. And I
Can I,
think, oh, go ahead.
if I could just respond real quick, I've been working in mental health for 20 years, and that's the first time I've heard that.
Yeah,
Wow. My
it was,
goodness.
yeah, it was very kind. And
Mm.
then there was a nurse on the psych ward who brought nail polish with her to work. And even in my fragile, agitated state, she painted my nails for me. And it
Oh,
just made me feel normal. It made me feel like, hey, we're just two women, we're peers, we're normal. And that meant so much to me, because not everyone treats you like you're a normal person there. Uh,
right.
and then I was headed to a homeless shelter one time from the psych ward out of the 3 times I went. And a woman gave me the coat off her backpack,
Mm.
a Tupperware container full of snacks and $40, and a prayer cloth that had been prayed on by a church congregation. And I was just blown away by that. It was the mother of another patient in there. And she simply said, so many people have been so kind to us that I want to pay it forward. And
Mm.
it was
That's
pretty
so beautiful.
it was pretty powerful. And I've only lost one friend through all this, and I think that's pretty good. Even though it really hurt when I felt judged or seen as different now that I was ill. For the overwhelming part, my true friends, my real friends, have been incredibly supportive and accepting. And my parents and my brother, my husband. My husband didn't know me when I was ill,
Mm.
but he still continues to be incredibly supportive, and my parents never gave up on me. My brother never gave up on me. My true friends never gave up on me, and that meant absolutely everything to me, because I felt like if other people believed in me, I could believe in myself.
Mm. I'm so glad that you got that level of support. It gives me hope that the world is changing, that people are extending themselves, and maybe mental illness will be more of a casserole disease, as we say, rather than one where people turn their backs when you go to the hospital because they're afraid of the whole topic.
Right.
Yeah. Anything that was unhelpful that you, for people who want to know what not to do?
I think the best gift you can give someone who's ill with something that's stigmatized that people don't understand is to treat somebody like they're normal. I mean, people with illness, especially who are embarrassed about being in a psych ward, the
Yeah,
best thing you can do is treat them like a normal person that you can relate to. Um, I think it was hard. I think it's been hard in situations where I've disclosed my diagnosis and I've been judged. um,
sure.
Painful statements based on assumptions, outdated assumptions about schizophrenia, especially sometimes in the counseling field. Um,
Ooh.
I've had rough experiences, and I'll stay positive. I won't bring them up, but that there has been. Well, there was a developmental counselor at my son's pediatrician's office who but she asked if I had any history of mental illness in my family. I said yes. And she said, who? I said, me. And then, what is it? And I told her. And she looked at my husband, who was sitting next to me, and said, you can't leave your son alone with her.
OMG. Wow.
So the word is still powerful. And I use it I use it carefully for the most part, because not everyone understands that now with proper medication and therapy, you can go on to lead a normal life after this. And
My goodness.
if you're one of the lucky people who respond well to antipsychotics.
Right. Yeah, that's an important piece. I've met several people who have, and you just would never know. It's a miracle, really.
And I feel like we are unsung heroes, because we've really been heroes and battled and won against something, but it's not something you always feel you can share, or it feels like something you still have to hide. Even if you overcame it, there's still this little bit of shame, or that you have something to hide.
I know what you mean. There's still this residual weight around it, this feeling of, uncertainty. If I share this, I might regret it. Um, yeah, there is that uncertainty and that judgment. What are you most proud of? You've accomplished quite a lot.
There are a few things I'm pretty proud of. First of all and foremost, um, I think the hardest part, and I write about this in my blog about loving yourself after psychosis. It's a blog post on the National NAMI blog, but um, like there was no way I could see the future and know that I was going to make it and that my life would be what I wanted it to be. But pushing and pressing on, even when there was no guarantee or likelihood that I would get better, I kept going to counseling every week. I kept using my medicine, kept talking to the psychiatrist. I kept pushing and believing and hoping. And I feel like I'm at a point in my life where I feel like I've done my best with the hand I've been dealt.
Yeah.
And I don't, there's not, I feel like there's nothing more I, I could have done to, to help fix myself and get myself to where I wanted to be, because I just knew I had this future ahead of me and I had to fight for it.
Mm, that's very inspiring. Hmm. At what point did you have that momentum in your recovery that you knew you had a future to fight for? Was there a turning point or more just one day?
But like one of my counselors said, Sarah, good things just have to happen to you and then they're just going to build on each other. And that was so true. Um, you know, first, first was getting my first job after the illness. And even though it was a simple admin job that would, that didn't require a lot of me, that was the perfect transition where I started dating my future husband. And that was a huge positive, like
Mhm.
dating this wonderful guy. Um, and then from there, after applying to so many jobs while I was in that admin job, I landed a career position that was related to my master's degree. And that was another huge
Mm,
move for me. And and then getting engaged and married, and um, then we got
mhm,
pregnant, and so all these pieces of my life that I wanted to be there started to come together.
mm. All right. That's very inspiring to hear. And you do have a very sort of focused, lucid way about you. So that is, I think that does make you a good spokesperson for mental health.
Oh, well, thank you.
You're very welcome. Tell us about self-care. What does that look like for you today?
Well, I'm always, even though I've done so well for so long, I'm still very careful and watch myself.
Mm,
There's been a couple times where something really stressful or upsetting has happened, and I'm like, okay, I need to lay down. I need to center myself. I feel like I'm kind of wondering, I just need to go home and center myself. Um,
mhm,
but I think what I focus on the most is balance and boundaries, because
mhm,
when I had my first major psychotic break, I was I did not have boundaries with how hard I pushed myself at school. I did not have
mm,
balance in my life. I would just throw myself into something with no breaks, and learning how to have boundaries with everything around me so I still have my core and I still have my focus is
mhm.
really important. One of the telltale signs that I would have a psychotic break was extreme irritability. So if I'm ever irritable at all, I'm incredibly like, whoa, I'm a little irritable right now. Let me check and make sure I'm okay.
Mm,
And these are all signs of insight, and we haven't really touched on anosognosia um, specifically. But I will say it is scary how, in an instant, just like that, your insight is gone, and it disappears in a way that you can't tell the difference from the moment you had insight and the moment you didn't. Um,
mhm,
and when I was healing in the psych ward, um, I describe it as a flickering light bulb. It would come in and out. I would know all of a sudden when I was in everyone else's reality there, and then it could just slip away
mm.
without me realizing it. But thank goodness I'm more of a rare case where I got full insight back, even after 3 times having anosognosia. And so I'm just incredibly lucky.
Yeah. Is there anything that you think brought you to that point of regaining insight, or was it more just the whole package?
It was the antipsychotics and the fact that they worked for me. I think one time my psychiatrist said that about a third of people respond well to antipsychotics. So I was part of that lucky third. And one thing I can say for myself, even when I didn't want to believe I was ill or had a problem, I still took my antipsychotic. And I think that's one of the things that saved me, even after the amphetamine intoxication in college. I took antipsychotics for years without even having a full-blown psychotic break yet, and I think that may have helped too. But I
Mhm,
can't stress enough that medicine, while it doesn't work as well for everyone, is an important ingredient of recovery from any type of um, psychotic break.
mhm. Getting lots of kind words from Diane Cresanda. She's with NAMI South Mountains, the president there, and the president of our board here at NAMI North Carolina. Sharing your, congratulating you on your huge insight,
Oh,
impressive, well spoken, honest. So yeah, thank you for all those kind words, Diane.
yes, thank
Um,
you.
yeah, Diane always has positive things to share. I can say too, I definitely lacked insight before I got any kind of mental health assistance, before I was willing to see that I needed that. And it's interesting when I when I lacked insight, I was convinced people were gossiping about me. I had ideas about what they thought and why, and I upset a powerful person. I think if anything, I felt more confident than ever in my view, my worldview. Like there was no uncertainty. And when I'm doing well, it's like, well, I don't know what I don't know. I don't know what that person thinks. I didn't enjoy that interaction very much. Um, so that's kind of an interesting red flag, is just that bold confidence, that I was completely convinced that I knew what other people were thinking and saying, without any data.
Yeah, I mean, I think the scariest thing about anosognosia is no one can reason with you. If you're in a full-blown break, what you perceive, as bizarre as it could seem to other people, is 100% real. Just like the sky is blue and the grass is green, it is 100% real. And no one can tell you otherwise. And if they do try to tell you otherwise, that person's plotting against you or not with you or something. So I think that's why it makes it so hard for caregivers of people with anosognosia, because you can't reason with somebody when they're in a full-blown state of that.
Right. I had a wonderful mentor at NAMI, Ohio, Ann Walker, and she would say, you can't reason with mental illness. You can't argue with mental illness. It just doesn't work. And I think we've got a comment from Allison on Facebook, I think, saying thank you for sharing. So we
Thanks, Allison.
appreciate those kind words, everyone. Okay. Any other thoughts about anosognosia that you'd like to cover?
I think I think it's just so chilling, the condition, because there was nothing protecting my life at that point. You know, I was being put through all these cosmic tests and hyper religiousness. Um, and I'm just lucky I came out of it alive. I mean, it was really a toss of the coin whether I even physically made it to the hospital, so I just I just feel, incredibly fortunate not just to have physically survived that time,
Mhm.
but that I made an emotional recovery as well, and now have the life I always thought I was supposed to have.
Mm. Well, that's beautiful. It doesn't always come full circle that way, but it's a thrill to hear that. I'm curious, were there activities that you were doing that put you at risk physically, or more just the sense of I wasn't in control, so anything could have happened?
Right. Like at one point, I thought a true test of faith was walking when oncoming cars are coming through a major intersection, and if I
Mm.
slowed down or sped up for cars, then that was a sign of a lack of faith.
Wow.
Hold on, just one second. My my batteries are.
Sure. That is very powerful. Yeah, absolutely. Um, it's amazing what our mind tells us, and how convincing that narrative is. That's the word that you used in one of your blogs that grabbed me, is like, this is my narrative. This is my reality now.
Right,
And there's
and
no questioning.
it's a complex, evolving reality. It wasn't as simple as just crossing the road or not. There was a whole idea about religion and the symbolism of colors having cosmic significance. It was highly intricate and evolved. And, sometimes you wonder, okay, how did my brain come up with this? Because I'm not even really religious, but like that's how
Mm.
it presented in me. And my brain just came up with this organized, elaborate system of reality that's just not even real.
Yeah, it is kind of fascinating, and I'm glad you're back with us.
I know
Yeah.
my computer almost ran out of batteries.
Oh, yeah, I'm definitely glad that was addressed. Um, what advice do you have for others about managing their mental health day to day?
I would say, you have to stay centered. In this day and age, you can get pulled in a million directions. You can say, yes, I'll do that. Yes, I'll do that. But always willing to take things down a notch if you don't feel stable. Um, I think there's this tendency now to overcommit to a lot of things. but you have to take care of yourself first because your mental health is more important than anything. Um, and you have to have people in your life that you can receive feedback from, especially if you're mentally ill. You have to
Mm,
have people in your life that are like, are you okay? You seem a little stressed, or maybe you should just take a day off. I think having people that you trust enough to give you feedback is really important.
mhm. Absolutely. And yeah, I think that could be one of the huge keys to recovery. I have a friend who lives with schizophrenia, and her what she negotiated with her husband when she needed to go to the hospital was she would say to him, I can't tell what's real. And she would get confused between reality and dream state. So having that one person who you know that you can give your trust to completely is amazing.
Right. And, like we were saying at the beginning of this webinar, I think before it was recording, I mean, my mother has that shared experience of knowing everything I've been through and was in the trenches with me, and
Mhm.
to have her in my life is just invaluable because she was there with me. She gets it. She knows how far I've come. A lot of people that meet me today, they see a perfectly normal person. They probably would never think that I went through all this. And in ways I feel like I have something to hide, like if people knew what I went through,
Mhm.
that they would look at me differently. Um, but yeah,
Well, thank you for having the courage to say it anyways, to produce your blogs and to be here with us tonight. Really getting a lot of wonderful sharing on Facebook and in the chat. From Denise, my son believes his psychosis was due to hanging his artwork. He believes the antipsychotic medication has caused the negative effects that he's now experiencing. And from Fort Bragg, feedback, this is a powerful, enlightening, and inspiring conversation. So thank you for all of that, folks.
yeah, thank you. That antipsychotics are not perfect. I have my own side effect that's very difficult from antipsychotics. It's called ocular crises, and it has to do with muscles in the eyes.
Mm.
But that's just something I've had to deal with. And, other people have other side effects from antipsychotics. So, like any medicine that you put in your body is going to have some kind of impact and sometimes unintended ones. But it's still the
Mhm.
best solution we have for psychosis.
Right, right. And as they continue to research mental illness, I wish they would do more. Really, we need to invest more in that area. But as we continue to move forward, hopefully more and more solutions and treatments will be available that are effective for folks.
Right. I can't, part of my excitement about being alive and being here is, seeing what they come up with about serious mental illness in the next 10 to 15 years, because I think things could really change. I think they're learning more, putting more research into it all the time. And I can't wait until maybe 10 or 15 years from now where schizophrenia is just another disease and nothing put out of perspective from a medical standpoint. I really look forward to when schizophrenia is just another disease you can have and nothing set apart or different due to stigma.
I do too, absolutely, where we've got parity with research, parity with insurance coverage in reality, not just on the books. And also where we have a parade and people, have their green ribbon and they're so proud.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I'm getting to the point where I'm proud that I survived this illness and that I was persistent and I didn't give up. And I'm getting there.
It does sound like you've shown a lot of perseverance. All right. Comment from Jerry. Thank you for sharing. This was helpful and hopeful. One more question before we turn to our video of the week. What gives you hope?
Let's see. Let me remember from my notes here. Um, I think, let's see. I think my hope, so uh, my prayer every morning, because I did pray, and I think that was important to maintaining that inner dialogue with myself and knowing I was still in there.
Mm.
Even in my darkest times of recovery when I felt hopeless, my prayer was I just couldn't, the one thing I couldn't tolerate is that what had happened was random and for no reason, no good reason, that nothing good
Mm.
could come out of what I went through and what I was going through to recover. And, really through my experience with NAMI, um, everything is coming full circle through being a support group facilitator, through writing the blogs, through joining the In Our Own Voice program.
Mm.
Uh, Good can come out of what I went through because my goal is to just make someone's life out there a little bit easier. Like if what I experience and what I've learned in hindsight can benefit somebody else, um, then that's all it takes for me. That just means so much to me.
Right. It's amazing how feeling that there's meaning to it, having a sense of purpose, can kind of lift the burden of suffering.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Well, you've definitely put your difficulties and your talents to good purpose. Um, yeah, we're going to wrap up the interview portion of the show now. Before we move on to our video of the week, I want to give a shout out to our helpers working behind the scenes, Executive Director Gary Kreitz, and our wonderful intern, MSW student from App State, Caitlin Rita. And of course, a big thanks to Sarah for spending your evening with us. I'm grateful for your time and your sharing your story.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Of course. So we'll be sharing a video of the week. This is developed by our national team. It's on the NAMI website, and it is a very brief film about schizophrenia. Let's see what they have to say. It's just over a minute.
Sitting in a room surrounded by 100 televisions, all on different channels with the volume turned all the way up. Now try to concentrate on one of the televisions. Try to make out one single sentence. Now imagine having that much noise in your head every minute of every hour of every day. Welcome to reality for 2.4 million American adults living with schizophrenia. Because schizophrenia manifests differently in every person, it might not be hundreds of televisions, but voices in your head that no one else hears, or different symptoms entirely. These distractions can be overwhelming experiences that lead to decisions and behaviors others find troubling. Schizophrenia doesn't appear to be linked to one specific cause. Studies suggest it could be the result of several interconnected factors, like brain chemistry, genetics, and environmental triggers. Thankfully, there are treatments which help manage schizophrenia, and, with the support of others, recovery is possible. You are not alone. We can help.
All righty. So I see we've got some questions lined up, everyone. So we'd love to hear from you, folks who are joining us via Facebook Live and on Zoom. You can type your questions in the comment box and it will be relayed to us. Or hit the Q&A if you're with us on Zoom, and we would love to answer your questions. All right, this is from the Fort Bragg Employee Assistance Program. What advice would you give employers, coworkers to best support well-being for employees returning to work after a psychotic episode that required hospitalization?
I think first and foremost to treat them like a medical patient, someone who's been through something rough, and just like having another disease, that without stigma, treating them like they're still capable of doing the job, and that what happened to them doesn't change anybody's opinion of them, because stigma and discrimination in the workplace for diseases like schizophrenia are still very real. And I'm sure that anybody going back to a job and disclosing that to their employer is going to be very worried that people's opinions of them are going to change. So being clear that their opinion of them hasn't changed and they don't see them any differently, I think is very important.
Mm-hmm. All right, question from Gary. And this is kind of a technical question. Is anosognosia especially prominent in schizophrenia, or is it part of other conditions?
It is part of other conditions, but overwhelmingly in schizophrenia. I think dementia and bipolar, there's another one, dementia, bipolar, but schizophrenia is the highest percentage when it comes to having this condition.
Yeah, that's helpful to know. I did some research on the condition before the show tonight, and I was fascinated to learn that the first time they ever noticed anosognosia, they weren't calling it that yet, but it was a condition called hemiplegia, where someone has a stroke and on one side of their body they have paralysis, and they wouldn't acknowledge it and they didn't seem to be aware of it.
Oh, interesting.
Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah.
It's some kind of neurological damage to the brain that caused it in that case. So yeah, it is a fascinating area and there's lots to learn there. Okay, another question. As someone who is into different visual arts, how did you get into graphic design, especially dealing with mental health and focusing on that?
Well, I started out as an artist. When I was little, I was the girl who could draw. That was my thing. And right when computer art first came out, when I was in maybe third or fourth grade, my dad had a Mac Paint. That was the only application out there, and I drew something on it and won an award for computer art for elementary school students. And that kind of started, my dad had a printing company, and I would design things for his office, that he would make, and that's just how I got started with graphic design. And I still draw and I still do art. I'm still a creative person, but I like kind of how graphic design is a combination of left brain and right brain, because I'm kind of left brain too, and I love doing branding and design for small businesses. That's kind of my passion. But it all started at my dad's printing company with Mac Paint when it first came out, the first design tool out there.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I remember the old Macs, and I remember we had a Commodore 64 when I was in high school. And just, I love dating myself, so there it is.
I think we're right at the same, dates. Yeah.
All right, that's fun. If you're with a person who is going through a mental health crisis, but they can't see it, what should you say or do?
That's tough. If they have no insight, sometimes if you try to reason with them, they'll see you as an enemy or part of their delusion.
Right.
I would make sure they're safe. Now with me, I willingly went to the emergency psych ward. I never resisted. I was fine going there, and I'm so lucky I was. But you have to just make sure that they stay safe, and that's hard because you can't always control whether someone walks out the front door and doesn't come back. You can't always control whether someone's homeless or not, because sometimes it's just impossible. So the best thing you can do, in my opinion, even though I'm not really sure, is shepherd them into safe situations. If you can get them to an emergency room, that is ideal.
Mhm.
But I know for a fact that even though emergency psych wards aren't the best place to be on earth, I needed to be there for my own safety, and thank goodness it was there for me.
Right. Very wise words. I was taught too that it can be very helpful to focus on the emotional piece of what the person is saying. You don't have to agree or disagree with them, but to give a response that reflects their emotions, like you feel like people are watching you 24/7 and you can't sleep. That sounds very painful. That sounds excruciating. That would be very frustrating. And just allowing them to feel heard can go a long way.
Yes, I mean, validation of emotion is really important because, like I said earlier, that emotion is 100% real, even if the reality isn't. So, making someone feel understood where they feel safe, even if they're very afraid. Yeah, very important.
Right. And definitely they advise against arguing about the delusion, as we were saying. Their beliefs are what they are right now. This is a difficult question from Facebook. How do you get someone to understand they need medication? This is a tricky one.
Well, actually, there is a blog that I wrote on NAMI called "What I Wish I'd Known." Uh, 4 myths debunked about medication, and in this blog, I talk about 4 major reasons why people resist taking antipsychotics. And I ran it by my resident psychiatrist at UNC, and she said it was spot on with
Hmm.
what she hears. But some of the reasons, some of them are reverse logic, like I only have a serious problem to be embarrassed about if I take an antipsychotic. That's a huge one. Like, I only have a problem if I take this medication. I don't have to face or have any embarrassing reality about me to others if I'm not hiding that I take an antipsychotic. And
Hmm.
and there were other reasons too. There's a lot of reasons why people don't take an antipsychotic because of the stigma. Like, they want to avoid a diagnosis. Like, taking antipsychotic is one more step towards receiving a stigmatized diagnosis. And I see that someone has posted the blog in the chat. I highly recommend to someone who does have a little bit of insight and needs to take medicine to read this blog, because it talks in depth about um, all the things that we think. Because I was embarrassed about taking an antipsychotic for years, and it was one of the reasons, aside from the side effects, that I ever went off of the antipsychotic, which led to the psychotic break. So I think it's really important to have that information out there that maybe can convince somebody that it's better to go ahead and take the antipsychotic, because I would do anything to go back and have never gone off an antipsychotic.
Hmm. Personally, I'm going to respond to that as well. I take antidepressants, but I was one of those people who didn't want to take medication because of the stigma. If I take medication, that makes me one of those people. I don't want to be one of those scary people. Everyone does counseling. That's no big deal. And I tried everything. I took St. John's Wort. I jogged. I did yoga. I joined Toastmasters. I rode my bike. I did everything that might possibly give me that boost. And when I finally was low enough to take medication, I could see it immediately. That was what my brain needed to function. So for me, that's yeah, I was one of those people who put it off as long as I possibly could. And now I embrace it. I'm like, nope, I don't want to talk about going off medication. I waited very long time for that. Um, and I understand there are people who don't need medication, and I support that. Whatever works for a person's recovery, more power to them.
Right. Yeah, I think with I feel like there's so much I know in hindsight now, and while it can't necessarily benefit me, I feel like blogs like What I Wish I'd Known About Medication, I feel like that can help other people so they don't make the same mistakes I did.
Very good. All right, question from Diane. How did you know you were in psychosis? What do you feel was the most helpful in your treatment?
Well, I'm lucky, like I said, that I responded well to medication. I'm lucky that I live in the Raleigh-Durham area and had access to a state-of-the-art emergency psych ward facility.
Hmm.
That was lucky. I got accepted into the outpatient clinic at UNC, which was a real key. I think I only knew after I stopped being psychotic that that I had been psychotic.
Right.
And that was a hard time emotionally, because then you're just like, oh my gosh, I just embarrassed myself. I wasn't myself. People saw me as someone other than myself. And I think that was really difficult. Does that kind of answer the question? Do you think?
I think that answers the how did you know, and then what do you feel was the most helpful in your treatment? I guess you did speak to that with access to very hot, top-notch care, and
Yeah, and being able to stay with my parents as I healed, I think that was huge, because I wasn't, there were reasons, why that may have not worked out, but, my parents just had unconditional love and acceptance for me and allowed me to stay with them. It just
Mm.
allowed me the time I had to heal before I was ready to get a job. And I think that stability and responding well to medication and going to weekly counseling for so long and, making my psychiatry visits. And I think it was a combination of support and luck that got me to where I am.
Mm. All right. Who do you feel was most helpful during your treatment?
Okay. I would say my mother. Um,
Aw.
because I mean, I had even before the even before the psychotic breaks, I had a really rough time in my 20s, and she was always there to she always stuck by me, and she has that lived experience with me where I don't have to hold on to everything myself to for it to matter. It mattered to her too, and like I said before, she's just been with me every step of the way. And, I don't think I could have made it through that without her and without her support.
Mm, that's wonderful. Interesting question from Gary. Have you learned lessons from schizophrenia that you might not have otherwise learned?
Absolutely. Like, I'm actually writing a nonfiction book proposal right now. And the last chapter is on takeaways from schizophrenia. And, surprisingly enough, I think I was overly seriously intense before all this happened, but I've learned to take myself not so seriously, and it's
Mm,
been a very humbling experience, where I don't take myself as seriously, and I think my compassion and empathy have grown. I feel like, just like they say that someone can see better who can't hear, and vice versa, when my mind failed me, my heart had to grow. And I've really learned how to not overthink or overanalyze situations and feel them more than I used to. Um,
mm,
and I've learned the power of gratitude, because I was bitter and felt sorry for myself for a long time, but I realized that being grateful for everything, and it's easier for me now to be grateful because things are coming together in my life in a way I could have never anticipated. Um, but learning that there's so much more power in being grateful than being negative. I think I've learned that too.
yeah. So Gary put a note in the chat that took the words right out of my mouth. When my mind failed me, my heart had to grow. Put that in your book, please. That's a beautiful, beautiful comment. I just love it.
I'll make note of that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Question from Facebook. Do you know much about cannabis-induced psychosis?
Now, I vaguely heard of an account that taking that can cause psychosis. Um, I would say it's more likely to happen if you have an overdose. Just like I had an overdose of Adderall in college, which was, of course, it was prescribed by the doctor. I was
Yeah.
overprescribed medicine by the doctor. Um, but that was my trigger, was an overdose that
Yeah.
caused psychotic elements. But I think I have heard of that, but I think it's in very specific conditions where that would occur. That it's not like anybody, it would have to be very specific situation where that could lead to serious mental illness.
Right. I know I heard the late mental health advocate, Dr. Fred Fries, speak to that on one occasion as part of my experience in NAMI, Ohio. And he said that it's happens with youth and young adults between very specific ages when the brain is going through a certain phase of development, if there's a genetic predisposition. So it is exactly what you said, in very limited circumstances. Um, that exposure to cannabis can, I thought it was linked to schizophrenia, but I'm sure it's on Google somewhere. Good questions.
Right. There could be a genetic predisposition for my son. So, when he gets to a certain age, I'm going to be clear about, taking care of himself and not getting involved with drugs and,
Yeah,
things like that, because I don't want him to, be susceptible because he might have a genetic predisposition.
right. Excellent plan. And Question, is this webinar recorded to watch later? Yes, it will live on Facebook Live and we will drop it onto YouTube within a week. All right. And what are your outlets? That's kind of a fun question.
Well, I now play tennis. Don't
Oh,
let
nice.
don't let anybody tell you that you can't learn something new, you know, that you didn't do when you were young. But I do tennis. I'm actually the captain of a tennis team, and really enjoy it a lot. I do weekly yoga, just one yoga class a week, but I'm planning on making it twice a week. Just haven't worked it into my schedule yet. Um, I write poetry. I write I write the blogs. Um, and occasionally when when I feel moved, I draw charcoal portraits of people, and I really enjoy it.
Nice. Huh. Well, I can't wait to see your book personally.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I've got an agent, and I'm just working on finalizing the book proposal now. So we'll see.
Very nice. All right. Well, thanks everyone for those excellent questions. We have a lull in the questions now. So I want to make some announcements. Please join us next week. We've got another fantastic guest, James Smith. He is a peer support and inclusion specialist at the Alliance of Disability Advocates. When he was released from prison in 2016, he was completely lost. He tried to reach out for help. The nonprofit didn't return his calls. He was looking for help with reentry after prison. His sister, his wife, and a church group guided him and helped him to learn to live independently in the community after many years of incarceration. Join us to hear his story. He's very eloquent as well. Please fill out the survey. If you're joining us through Zoom, a survey will magically appear when you leave the webinar here, and we would love to hear your input. It helps us improve over time. It helps us show our funders what we do, the value of everything that we put out there, and we appreciate it so much. Do you have any closing thoughts, Sarah, or anything else we haven't asked?
Oh, this has been great. This has been wonderful. My mom's actually on this webinar, so I'm really excited that she gets to hear about what I've been doing, what I've been working on. And this has just been a great opportunity to just get involved with NAMI in the different ways I'm involved. And I'm just really thankful.
All right. Well, I'm grateful too. I'm grateful that we met and that you carved out time for us tonight. I know you have a lot going on. And if you're out there and you're feeling alone, you're feeling like nobody understands you, and nobody understands the road that you're on, please give us a call at NAMI. We would love to help. Maybe you could find the right support group or find that person who hears your song, who listens to you in a different way and sees the real you. So thanks for being here, everyone, and have a wonderful night. All right. Thanks, Sarah. I hope to see you again soon.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night.